Hello again and welcome to episode 2 of Tom's Garage. Today I'm going to be doing the spark plugs and valve cover gaskets on the Dodge Ram 5.7 liter Hemi motor. And here I've managed to get the truck nice and low. As I have the fender wells out, I can get up and get at the rear bolts really easy. Coils off, get the valve covers off, and I'll take this off and clean the throttle body. And these are the parts that I'm putting in today. In this case we have these are factory Mopar replacement spark plugs, which are actually NGKs. They're already pre-gapped. I've checked the gap, and all I'm just going to do is just put a little bit of anti-seize on each spark plug. So the hardest part back here is getting all these rear bolts loose. And you're going to use a combination of 1/4-inch drive, 13mm sockets and wrenches to get all these coils loose. Now the bolts won't come off of the coils. They'll stop after they get to the top of their thread, so you won't lose any of these bolts that retain each coil. But getting to them is going to be a pain in the butt for you because this brake booster's in the way. Alright, well the good news is that I don't have any valve cover leaks. So last summer when I did the big tune-up before we took our towing trip to Idaho, I tightened down all the valve covers and all the valve cover bolts, and that seems to have sealed it. So I'm not going to change them at this point. I think that it's be unnecessary. I do think that they will start to leak probably as the engine gets closer to 225,000 kilometers if I continue towing as hard as I do. So at this point I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to replace the spark plugs. So that saves me a lot of time. So the only other thing I've done here is I've cleaned the throttle body with some carburetor cleaner. And you can do that quite simply by using a rag and some carb cleaner and spraying the rag wet and wiping, and then you can spray in there and basically clean it out. Don't deluge the motor with carb cleaner because you risk a backfire. If this thing backfires, it's got a plastic manifold, you're in big trouble then. So basically the process here now is just to take each set of spark plugs out. So each piston has 2 spark plugs. That's mainly due for emissions, NOx reduction, and I guess some performance gains as well. The original Hemis only had 1 spark plug per cylinder. This one has 2. All the newer ones have 2. So the process of getting them out is pretty straightforward. You're going to use a collection of different extensions on your spark plug socket to get them loose. The only other thing is to make sure you put a little dab of anti-seize on each spark plug thread. That way you prevent them from getting locked in there. And here's all the coils and the spark plugs. And these have already been gapped. I've checked the gap in the manual, and they're all good. So that makes it easy. So I don't have to re-gap these. And these are NGKRs. You'll notice that they're just a regular copper spark plug, and that's actually what Chrysler recommends for these Hemi motors, is just a copper core plug, and you replace them every 50,000 kilometers, which is a little excessive nowadays. The newer ones have iridium plugs, and you change them every 100,000 miles, which is 160,000 kilometers. But these older motors have copper. And people are going to argue, well, why don't you just install iridium plugs? Well, you can't, because these coils are specifically designed for the copper core plug, and they'll burn out. After a little while you start to get a misfire and you'll fry your coil. So unless you want to replace all these with new ones, which you could, they're 30 to 50 bucks a pop. So if you want to spend your money like that, that's great. But you won't really see any performance improvement. And any engine will run better with fresh plugs, regardless if they're copper, iridium, or some unobtainium metal. Fresh plugs are fresh plugs. Any drag racer will know that. They'll change the plugs, well, every run if you're in top fuel, but fresh plugs are is always the best way to keep detonation down and have a nice crisp point for your spark. So I'm going to anti-seize all these, and I'll start removing all the old plugs, and I'll line up all the old plugs and we'll see what they look like. So here we have the passenger side spark plugs from front to back, all taken out. And actually you can see the one that's right above the PCV valve gets the most oil, which is completely normal. And that's the only one. Everything else looks normal. So it's really easy to get them out. There shouldn't be any magic involved here. Basic hand tools, 5/8 spark plug socket, extensions, nothing magical to do this job. It's just grunt work. Now having the fender wells taken out makes it a lot easier, but it's not really required to do the spark plugs. It only really helps you get the coil fasteners off on the back sides. Considering how hard this to do, I know I mentioned before I would never take these side fenders out to do the spark plugs, but if I do this again, I will definitely do that because it's really hard to get to them going from the top. It's so much easier doing it this way that it's actually worth the time to do it. In this case, I'm using a vice grip to clamp on the socket to hold it while I disengage it. Alright, I should be able to come all the way out now with the spark plug. Well, these look really good, which is a good sign. There's no issues in the motor. So lining up the driver's side bank, none of the cylinders have anything to worry about. They all look nice. Mixture looks good. So I'm just going to install new ones. Remember, these go, when I tightened them on the other side, they went a good half turn, and then between half and 3/4 is really where it comes to snug. But it won't go one, so don't do a full turn, you'll strip it out. But between half and 3/4 of a turn, you'll compress that gasket, and once it compresses, you'll be good until they need to be replaced again. Alright, everything's back together. Spark plugs are in, exhaust and everything is tied down, fender wells are in. So here you can see the smooth running motor. Everything's nice and quiet now. And detailed it a little since I had everything out. And it looks good. So the next step up is a test drive where we run her hard and see if anything starts coming up as a problem. But it's running nice and smooth. Really good. I'm pretty happy with it still. Okay. So this is my gratitude to myself. I'm gonna do some burnouts. So back up a little.